5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond with your host, Justin.
But before we get started, how was your Geek Week?
And co-hosts Dan and Jason.
You have to be willing to let the dice help you tell the story.
Okay, look, this year I'm going to stop mispronouncing words. Join us as we cover board games to war games and beyond.
And welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. I'm your host, Justin. We have got a great show for you. It might be a little short, won't it, Lincoln?
We'll see. Stunty for sure.
As you can note it, or as you can tell, Jason and Dan are both out today, but I am joined by one of our favorite guest hosts, Lincoln Tidwell. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
And you had a great idea the other day that we should dedicate this show all dwarves, and I think it's because you had dwarves on the brain, though.
Right? Where's the love for the stunties, right? They need their own episode. Definitely.
You're only saying this because you're about ready to go to a tournament with a bunch of dwarves.
All dwarves. That's true.
All dwarves, all the time. And you were
all
really
dwarves,
pumped about it
way.
when we were playing the other day.
Right, that's right. I was pumped about that W, too.
Barely W. Yeah. Well, we've got a great show. We're going to be talking about dwarves, dwarvish lore, our favorite dwarves, our favorite dwarf movies, our favorite dwarf RPGs. This is the dwarf show, so right. You're probably going to hear us say that word a lot.
And we're definitely going to be talking about some dwarf army lists.
Yes, definitely. Yes, we are. Definitely going to talk about that. So, to kick us off, though, Lincoln, how was your Geek Week, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. I've had a pretty technology-focused Geek Week. I spent 4 days this week for 9 hours a day doing AWS training for work.
Oof.
And then I'm also doing some calculus and some Python in my spare time for fun. So, yeah, my wife says, I feel like you've used your brain more in the last 6 months and you've used it for a really long time. And
like your whole life?
I didn't know if that was like a compliment or like a terrible thrashing that she just gave me. But I will be spending this weekend getting ready for the Du Bois tournament next week. I've got to get a Kazrai completely built and painted and then touch up some of my executioners that are going to be in a partner list with a buddy of mine.
And Du Bois starts what, next Thursday?
Friday.
Friday.
Yep.
Is it a Friday-Saturday tournament?
It's a Friday team tournament.
Oh.
And then it's a Saturday-Sunday individuals tournament.
So you're going up with the team that day?
I'm going up for Thursday morning, actually, to help with some of the terrain setup.
Okay.
And then I'll be playing Friday with a buddy of mine named Will. He's playing Stormcast, and I'm bringing a cities list with a dragon and some executioners and some fun stuff. And then the following day, it's all dwarves all weekend.
So you're going to be playing 8 games over 3 days.
That's what it's going to be. It's going to be a lot of Warhammer.
Are you driving back on Monday?
Sunday night.
Sunday
afternoon-ish night, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, what, a 6-hour drive up there?
Yeah, it's like a 6.5, yep. So
that's not terrible.
Nah, I'll get home by midnight probably for sure. Because it's just 2 games on Sunday, and they tend to wrap pretty well. Du Bois, the team, the individual tournament, anyways, is run by Josh Keel, and he does a really good job of getting us in, getting us happy, and getting us out. So,
I was talking on our last Talking Warhammer episode that Du Bois has really grown in popularity over the last couple of years. It started out kind of small, but I know a lot more people that are going up more often.
Yep, they sell out. They sell out. This is the second year in a row. I know they've sold out. Last year I didn't get to go. I had some family stuff going on. Yeah. But I'm really excited about going back.
I got to get up there one of these times.
I got the last time I went to Du Bois, I got favorite opponent.
Oh, nice.
I took Star Drake and Gotrek. It was like a joke army. I was like, I'm taking a dwarf and a dragon. I got favorite opponent.
That's funny.
Pretty funny.
That's awesome. Well, I too, Lincoln, was learning to code this week, except my focus was on JavaScript. So
What's
I've
that?
been taking a course from Udemy. Udemy? I don't know
You
how you
dummy.
say it. You dummy? You the dummy?
You the dummy.
You dummy. But I've been taking a kind of like an online course there to learning how to code. You and I have talked, outside of the podcast about building an app for our Warcry game. So I am kind of learning how to code the front end of that so that everything will work right and buttons will work when they get pushed and things like that. Because I think that the game is in desperate need of an app, and I reached out to Games Workshop to talk to them about it, and they just basically just stiff armed me. So they're like, "Yeah, that's not really something we're interested in right now. Thank you though, bye." I'm like, "All right, well,
They're
I'll just
like,
build it
yeah.
myself."
I think what they were doing actually, they were giving their permission for you to go and do.
That's exactly what I heard.
Think about it like that. They're like, you know what? This isn't for us, but that means it must be for you.
If somebody wants to do this, just not us,
Right.
that might be interesting.
Yeah.
I noticed they didn't give me explicit permission, but I took it as totally, implicit permission.
Definitely.
So, but anyway, so I've been focused on that. It's been really interesting. My brother, he codes quite a bit. I mean, that's like what he does for his job, right? And so I was like, dude, what's going on here? And he's like, you missed a comma here. And I'm like, oh. Like, it's one of those things, man, where you're just like, one little comma, or if you use a comma instead of a semicolon, like, it just, I gotta get used to it.
Yep. So what are you using to program in? What are you writing in?
I'm just using, what is it, Microsoft Visual Basic Code or Visual Code or whatever.
Visual Studio Code?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's actually great. That's what I use for my Python, so do that. It's great.
It's really good. So
I can probably help you a little bit with that if you get stuck. So.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Yeah, so it's been good. The course has been very good. It's taking you through basics like step by step. So
is it a free course or is it something you had to pay for?
it was something I had to pay for, but my company kind of gave me a little stipend to get a year membership from Udemy, and so that was free in the membership.
Awesome.
So so it's pretty good. The other thing that I wanted to talk about for my Geek Week is, I don't know if you've seen this, Lincoln, on Netflix. They have this show called Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yes, I actually added it to my favorite. I added it to my list last night.
Okay, so I watched the first
seen it
episode.
Yet, but I added it to my list. Yeah.
I watched the first episode today.
And
it's legit, dude. It's really good. The first episode, I'm like, I'm in. You son of a gun, I'm in.
Nice. That's awesome. Guess what I'm doing after our little talk here?
Yeah, and like each episode's only like 30 minutes, maybe.
I'm gonna go
40
binge
minutes.
3 or 4 of them then.
Yeah, like it's they're and they gave a preview at the first one, and I'm like, all of these look really good. Like they look really good. So I'm a sucker too for anthologies. Like I'm a big fan of like short story anthologies, like where you have like George R.R. Martin, who wrote.
Yeah. I've never been much for Dinosaur Bones.
Yes. Nice. George R.R. Martin, he was the writer of Game of Thrones, but when he wasn't writing his last few books, he was editing some of these anthologies, and like one of them was about like magic, or another one was like a horror one, and just these famous people were writing just these little short stories that are centered on that theme. And like I just really love like when you kind of give somebody like a group of people like sort of a writing prompt or an idea, and then they all take it in very different ways, so I'm very excited for this show. I'm awesome. Very excited, and it's very Lovecraftian too.
I'm gonna have to watch it.
If you like Call of Cthulhu or anything Cthulhu, like this is the show for you for sure.
I like that Lovecraft thing that was on HBO. It just got kind of weird, and it wasn't long enough, and then they didn't do a second season. So
yeah, well, I mean, it kind of ended where it ended. It was based off of a book, believe it or not. I don't know if you've seen that book before, but I think I said this on the show before. My issue with that show is it was very heavy on the kind of racial undertones of the day, and not enough heavy on the Lovecraftian stuff. Like that show was best when it was leaning.
Episodes.
Yeah, that show was best when it was leaning heavy into the Lovecraft stuff.
Yep, I agree. I still thought it was great. I thought
Yeah,
it
it
was.
was. It was
I
good.
wish there was a second season. I totally would have binged it like I binged the first. So,
Yep.
but that's okay.
Yeah. Once you get those Lovecraftian tentacles wrapped around you, hard to let go.
Right?
Hard to let go.
I
Yeah.
have to admit, I've seen some things on Netflix and Amazon for Lovecraftian shows that I'm not necessarily proud of watching. The quality of some of those shows is terrible, dude. It's terrible.
That's
And
awesome.
like the budget for models is like way out of it's out the window. They got none, so it's like family friends. I think it's pretty bad.
You see like the wires in there with like janky things.
It's
so good.
terrible.
So funny. So yeah, very good. Well, very short Geek Week for us because there's only two of us. But there are some interesting items of geek news this week. The first one that I want to... Actually, I'm going to save that first one for the last. The first becomes the last, Lincoln. The first one that I'm going to talk about is that late pledges are still open for the Dungeon Delver's Guide. Now, if you're not super familiar with what this is, it is a 300-page source book to use with 5e and Level Up Advanced 5th Edition. And it contains everything you need to create compelling and deadly mazes and lairs. So, like, this is all about making amazing dungeons to dive through. I think there's a bunch of guides out there like this, but the thing that made me very interested about this one is that it's created by EN Publishing, which is the same people who are behind the ENnie Awards, which is basically all the board game, tabletop gaming, RPG awards that happen every year at Gen Con. So... This is the so this is their book, basically kind of their dungeon guide on how to build great dungeons. And so one of my issues with I think a lot of dungeons that people play in is that they're pretty generic. I mean, like you just kind of like wander through and things like that. And so I like the idea of having a very good guide of how to just like focus on that.
Rock on.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that sometimes the dungeons you end up like labeling like big room 1, big room 2, big
Right.
you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
Tavern or armory, you know what I mean? And as you're walking through, guys, just kind of it ends up being a very generic dungeon crawl, right? For sure.
Yep. So I think where you can come up with some, and sometimes the trap locations are pretty obvious, right? Where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to look for traps.
I got a funny thing. I kind of did it on purpose. So I run I'm in the middle of a little campaign right now. I think we've done our 4-shot. Maybe it'll be 5. We'll be done. But I threw a treasure chest in the water, and I put it by some rocks so it would be hidden, so that my players would have to look for this on a VTT. Right, so they kind of have to look for it, and if they didn't say anything, they were going to just go right on by it with their boat that they were in, right?
Yeah.
And one of my players says, "Oh, look, you guys, a treasure chest," and the other 3 had not seen it at all.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then Scooter, who has been on here, he's in the group, and he says, "I want to jump out of the boat and get the treasure chest." And I said, "Are you sure? Like you're going to jump in the water and go grab a treasure chest?" And he says, yes. And so I tell them all to roll initiative as a giant octopus comes out of the rocks and goes to defend his treasure chest and almost TPKs them. It's pretty awesome. It was awesome. It was very great. Nobody died, but it got really close. So
yeah.
So there you go.
That's funny.
Watch out for traps. They're not all so obvious.
Yeah, and when you're a party that is known for just basically chasing the shiny things, that's when the DM gets to have some fun.
Right, it was so good, dude.
Like,
I
it's
was
like you
literally
totally walked into it.
It took us like I don't know, maybe almost an hour to get through that encounter, and it was really funny because it was not even on the menu. You know, it was totally up to them. If they saw it, we could do it. If not, we were just going to go on by it. You know, and it was really
so. What
fun.
Was in the treasure chest?
Oh, I'd have to look it up. I don't recall at the moment, but it was pretty.
It would have been hilarious if it was empty. Like the octopus just liked the chest.
That's hilarious. If it was empty, that's terrible. I didn't do that. I gave them, I think it was a scroll and some these special Underdark purple gems that they're currently searching for.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Maybe there should have been octopus baby eggs laid in there. That's why the mom was defending it so voraciously. And then they feel so bad that they just killed the mom of all these babies.
Right, and there was a bunch of Dwargen in the cave too, so you never know. Right back to our stunties here.
That's right.
So.
That's right. All right. So the other news item is that Warhammer 40K, the Dark Tide game that's coming out from Fat Shark Games, it's coming out on PC, Xbox, on the Xbox, and I believe on PlayStation as well. So this game, it is coming out November 30th, but they just dropped a new cinematic trailer. Have you seen that one yet, Lincoln?
I'm not.
Oh, dude, it's legit. Like, it's one of those, like, do you remember when, like, the recent Space Marine trailer came out for the game? Yep. And you're just like, dude, that was really good.
Right.
Yeah, this one's, like, right up there with it, too, where you're just like, oh, like, it just sucks you into the lore of 40K.
I love the 40K lore, just not a fan of the game right now, but, that's okay.
Oh, I'm a super fan of the lore. I like Kill Team a lot more than 40K.
Yeah.
Because the skirmish game, it's pretty easy, and you just don't. I don't know. 40K right now is just not singing to me. But the lore of 40K is like second to none, dude. I don't know a game that has better lore than 40K right now.
Right.
So, but anyway,
the siren song of 40K is more likely to make me want to drown myself than to actually play. So.
Well, are you familiar with this game, Dark Tide?
I'm not. I am not. So.
Did you ever play Vermintide?
I did, yeah. Yep, you bet.
So
we have it on Xbox and on PC, I think.
Yeah, so this is Vermintide 40K style. So you've got, like, power hammers, las guns, bolters, like...
That could be fun.
Oh, it looks amazing. And you're just, like, battling off hordes of chaos and, like, demon spawn and all that stuff.
So it's been, like, 5 years since Vermintide came out, and GW's just getting the reskin done. Good job, guys.
Right?
Congrats.
But it looks good, though. And the mechanics, I mean, it looks super smooth. The mechanics and graphics look amazing in it. So,
awesome.
Do you have the Xbox Games Pass?
I do, actually. I got it for you.
That's right.
Some game you were playing. I don't think we ever played, but I've had it for like a year, and I've been paying for it, so that's fine.
Well, that's good. It's good that you're paying for it, because it comes out on November 30th, and we're going to get on it together, and we're going to play.
Oh, that sounds like a good idea.
Because it's a day one drop. It's a day one drop on Xbox Games Pass.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that'll be a lot of fun to play over the holidays. Yeah, so the other one that last point that I wanted to make, this made huge waves yesterday. I don't know if you saw this, Lincoln, but Atomic Mass Games, who took over all of the Star Wars miniature games. So they have like Armada, X-Wing, Legion, like they do all those. They just announced yesterday that they would be fielding a skirmish game, and they're calling it Star Wars Shatterpoint. Did you see the trailer for that?
No, I haven't. You should be giving me links to this as we're talking about it.
The links are in the
document.
document.
Sounds awesome.
The links are in the document.
I know. I just want everybody to know that you put links in the document.
But
great.
yeah, listen, it looks really good. Google, for our listeners, Google atomicmassgames.com/Shatterpoint. It's got like the trailer on there. It gives you the announcement. Like, it looks really good, and the minis look amazing, and they look like they'd be a lot of fun to paint. And I don't know if they come pre-painted. I don't know anything like about that, but I doubt they do. I have a feeling they're going to be like the Star Wars Legion. Some of them look like they came straight from Star Wars Legion, like the heroes, So, but they look really good. So you've got one here. It says the Shatterpoint's game fun and flexible squad building experience invites players to create custom strike teams optimized to complete the various mission objectives. Players can choose thematic squads straight from the Star Wars galaxy, like Ahsoka Tano, Bo-Katan Kryze, Lord Maul, and his loyalist super commandos, or mix and match their favorite characters to form the custom squads they want to play. So, nice. They're going to have, like, basically a core, like a base core set, and then there'll be, like, tons of expansions that come out with different people that you can play. So,
well, you better start talking to the game stores around here, make sure they're stocking it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Get on it.
I wonder if it's going to be like... So Atomic Mass Games is also the company that does Crisis Protocol. So I wonder if this game is going to be a little bit like Marvel Crisis Protocol in that sense. For Star Wars. It seems like
that sounds awesome, by the way.
I know that game's got good bones.
Their stuff all comes unpainted, so that means their stuff will likely come unpainted then.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was talking with Devin today, and he's like, I cannot wait to get my hands on some of these.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. This is coming summer of 2023. So you've got approximately 8 months to get your backlog of painting done so that your table is clear for this.
I need more than 8 months, but we'll see.
I know, right?
Seriously, I have so much that I want to get done.
I'm
to the point now that I've got so much done that I need to make room so I can paint more and get rid of the stuff that I have painted. But
I know.
Getting rid of means putting in a box for my grandchildren. I'm not sure what. So much stuff, man. Someday, right, my lineage someday will open up this box of Warhammer models and be grateful that their great-great-grandfather painted them. I think that's going to happen. Because if I sell it, you always get seller's remorse, right? You're like, man, I shouldn't have done that. So,
yeah.
as much as I could see myself getting more in, I could buy more models with the money I sell, right? That I get from selling, but I just can't bring myself to do it. So I'm just like a hoarder, man. It's
I know.
Greatest feeling ever.
I got a whole bunch of I got that old Korn Stormcast battle box from a long time ago, right?
Yep.
And Jason at one point was interested in getting into Korn. So I was like, I'll sell you this half for $70 or whatever, which was a good deal for that half. And he's like, great. So I sold it to him, and then Warcry comes out, and there's a whole thing for all those models that they could have been a warband. And I'm like, dang it.
Could have had a warband for $70.
I know, and a good one too, right? In terms of a lot of variety. And I'm like, dang it, the total seller's remorse right there,
Yep.
So. Yeah, I get it. But, that Shatterpoint looks really good. I can't wait for us to see more about it. And you said you've played Crisis Protocol before, right?
I have never played Crisis Protocol.
Okay.
I bought the starter box, I have it downstairs, I think.
Oh.
And I've seen it played, and I've been to Devin's house, Devin Meyer.
Yeah.
I think Mayer.
Yeah.
I've been to his house lots of times, and he paints for them.
Right.
So some of the models that I've seen that are painted are just outstanding, amazing. And I know it's really cool because you can throw the terrain, you can do all kinds of really great stuff in that game that if I had a local crowd that played it more, I think I would definitely be into it. In Star Wars, there will be a local crowd at my game store, so that's exciting.
Why have we not played Crisis Protocol yet? I didn't know
I don't like to play games with unpainted minis.
Oh yeah.
So I guess I could drop the box at your house, and you can get it painted up, and we can play. That sounds like a pretty good deal. I provide the game, you provide the paint. I provide the W.
Just put it in the backlog, man.
You got 8 months to go.
Exactly. All right. Well, that's all we got for news today. So let's talk about our main topic, buddy. As we mentioned before, this will be a short episode.
Yes.
On our dwarven friends.
I've been growing a beard since April, just for this show.
I know.
I'm looking very dwarfish, by the way. For those of you who don't know me, I've got a pretty big old friggin' beard going. I haven't cut the mustache either, so the mustache is long all the way down. So I got this big beard face for dwarves.
I was gonna say, although the other day I saw a picture of you and your mustache was kind of curled up, you look like an old Western villain.
Yeah, I went for that. I went as the King of Hearts or the King of Diamonds for Halloween.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to dwarves.
All right, so Lincoln, we love dwarves, right?
Yes.
So why do we love dwarves so much?
So I love dwarves because I grew. Well, I mean, I think everybody loves dwarves for different reasons.
Yeah.
But so I made some notes, right, about what I think dwarves are, right, kind of their characteristics, right?
Yeah.
And so dwarves are honorable, right? Generally speaking, yes, there's the roguish dwarf occasionally, right? But generally, dwarves are pretty honorable, right? They're not. They're very. They like order, right? They make an oath and they give their word, right? They're good for it, right? Dwarves have beards, so
Yes,
that's
they do.
definitely a good thing, right? They're always drinking ale, which makes them fun. They like to mine, right? So they're always mining, whether
Yep.
it's jewels, gems, gold, mithril, whatever they're going after, they like to mine, right? And I have fond memories as, you know, a youth playing, you know, online games, and I would take my guy to World of Warcraft and I would just mine for hours and hours. And I was a dwarf and I was mining, and that was enough.
Yeah.
Didn't even matter what else I did, right? They generally are well equipped for war, right? They wear chainmail armor, right? They wear mithril armor, or they run around naked, right? Like the
Yeah.
three best ways to wear armor, right? To wear chainmail, to wear mithril, to wear none,
Yeah.
right? They qualify for all of those, right? They are geeks of the week, right? They are engineers, right? So
Right.
they're always building, they're improving. They work at forges. They sweat a lot, right? They are around fire and molten, and they love it, right? They thrive in that, right? They use gunpowder, right? They have crossbows, and they hit things with hammers. Like, that's enough. Like, take your lore for your stinky elves and get out of here. Like, that's all I need for an army is everything that I've just said, right?
Yeah.
Honorable guys with beards that wear armor, that use gunpowder, and they hit things with hammers. Right, and they fix stuff. They're engineers. That, to me, like, sign me up. I'm all in.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the like folklore and mythology surrounding dwarves, right? We get a lot of what we believe to be dwarves from Germanic mythology and Norse mythology. Like, those are kind of the two main areas where we sort of get them from. And you know, it's funny because there's, you know how like in Irish folklore, like if you dive into real Irish folklore, like leprechauns are actually really tall. In old Norse like mythology, dwarves actually weren't that short. It wasn't until like later after like Christianity got there and they were kind of thought as like lesser supernatural beings that they were sort of like considered short and ugly.
So they were like fire slayers before, where they're kind of tall, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because, like, they are, especially in Norse mythology, they're kind of associated with creation through like metalsmithing, but also death. And so I don't know. I think they kind of, it also says, like, I'm kind of looking at some Norse mythology here. They also guard like the doorways in the mountains, right? And that's kind of like considered doorways between worlds, sort of thing. So like they inhabit this area where they've got like 1 foot in the world and then 1 foot in the supernatural as well, which I think is kind of interesting because, you know, there's a lot of like, you look at these mountains and there's like a lot of I guess myth and supernaturalness about it, you know, and so the idea that there's these people living under these mountains, mining and creating and engineering and all this stuff is kind of right. Like romantic in a way, you know?
Right, and they're very aggressive, or they can be, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Watch out for this aggressive dwarf, right? Who's like driven by glory. You know what I mean? Like, it's just awesome. It's
Yeah.
the best. It literally is the best.
So, in terms of like actual lore and from like what we know, like what is your kind of favorite? What's your favorite go-to lore for dwarves?
Well, the dwarven lore that I'm most familiar with, right, would be like from Lord of the Rings, from Warhammer, and from Game of Thrones. Go Peter Dinklage, right?
All right,
he probably is like a top 5 dwarf, though. Just to be straight with you.
I mean, you're probably right.
That's pretty great. Peter Dinklage did it on his own too. That's awesome.
So, yeah. So, what do you like?
So,
I mean, we're all kind of familiar with like the Lord of the Rings dwarves, you know, like they, you know, Moria and Dwalin and you know all of that. But talk about Age of Sigmar. Like, what really draws you into that mythology, that lore in Age of Sigmar?
Sure. So, well, dwarves in or Dwarden, whatever you want to call them, right? Dwarden, for those of you who don't know, or what GW calls dwarves, so they could own their IP.
Yeah, right.
But
Exactly.
I still call them dwarfs, and I spell it with an F because they're dwarfs,
Yeah.
right? And they are one of the oldest races in the Warhammer world. They used to have their own empire that stretched from Norska in the north to the jungles in the south, and from Mount Silver Spear in the east to the Grey Mountains in the west. So they used to have this huge empire, right, in the old world of Warhammer. And so as the story, right, of the Warhammer world has progressed over the years, for good or bad, right, you find that the dwarves are primarily driven, and I'm going to say this, and most people are going to cringe, by three gods. The first is Grimnir, right?
Uh-huh.
He's like passionate, violent warrior who's also driven by glory and fire and aggression. And those of you that are fans of Fire Slayers, right, that's kind of the god that is kind of their mold is made from, right? And then you have Grungni, who is like the artisan craftsman, engineering, creating weapons of war god. And I would say that he is the god that gives dwarves their ingenuity, right? Their artisanship. And so a lot of like the KO were kind of created or forced to being what they are, and their creativity of doing things differently from his influence.
Yeah.
And then you have the third god that is currently influencing the dwarves in the world of Warhammer, and his name is Sigmar, right? Which he shouldn't be doing that, but alas, right? You have this group of dwarves called the Dispossessed, who are currently living in the cities of Sigmar, amongst the other races, for the sake of good, right? For the sake of order.
Yeah.
And when I think about a dwarf in the cities of Sigmar, I think of like Gimli, right? And like the Fellowship of the Ring, right? Where he's working with elves and humans and hobbits, and he's okay with it, right? Because they're all working toward this order, toward a good purpose, right? And so I'm a fan of the Dispossessed primarily because of that.
Yeah.
And then second, right, I would say I'm a fan of the Fire Slayers as my next choice, and then lastly, would be KO for me. Yeah.
So for our listeners who aren't super well versed in Age of Sigmar, who are the Fire Slayers and who are KO?
Right. So there were two dwarven gods. The first was Grimnir, and the second one was Grungni. It's spelled Grungni. Grungni. Grimnir was a passionate, violent warrior who's glory-driven with fire and aggression. Right. So during the Age of Chaos, Grimnir went to Sigmar and said, "I need something to do," right? Effectively.
Yeah.
And so Sigmar tells Grimnir, "Go fight Volcatrix, who is this beast of a dragon, kind of like a giant fire-breathing god dragon, if you were." And so there's this huge, so Grimnir, he's excited because he's got something to do, right? So they have this huge battle, right? They both kind of explode, if you will, meaning that there's such ferocity in this battle that they shatter, literally. And so you take the essence of a god, and Volcatrix explodes into a pile of gold, and their essences combine, and you have gold fused with the god essence, and it explodes across the mortal realms. Right, and the Fire Slayers, they've discovered that if they take this gold, is what you call this gold that's fused with their god's essence, that they can do things with it. It can make their weapons more powerful when the runes are applied to their weapons with the gold. When it's melted and put into their weapons, they can put runes on their skin, and it gives them power so they can be stronger, hit harder, fight more fiercely, and because that gold, that gold has their god's essence in it, they want all of it, right? They want to collect their god, as it were. So they will literally do anything to go and find this Urgold so
Yep.
that they can use their god's power, which is Grimnir, right? And so there's magma Dwarfs in Fire Slayers, which are like these big dragons that they can ride.
Yep.
And those are sort of like the sons of Volcatrix, I think is how that's worded. So they work together, right? The sons of Volcatrix and the sons of Grimnir, the Fire Slayers, to go and to collect this Urgold. And the funny thing about about the Fire Slayers is they will do anything to get this Urgold, meaning that they are honorable. They are all the characteristics that a dwarf would be, but they will do bad for the sake of good. Meaning that they would go and they would ally with somebody to do maybe, let's say, a bad deed as a mercenary.
Yep.
But they're doing it for the sake of good, and that they need to get the essence of their god, right, collected. So because of that, they're driven maybe to do things that maybe dispossessed dwarves in the realm of Sigmar may raise an eyebrow at. But at the end of the day, they're doing it for the right reasons. So that's,
I was gonna say they're pretty mercurial in the sense that like they'll do anything for that Urgold. So you could see them allying with demons or allying with ogres or something like that,
right,
just to get that sweet Urgold.
right. And then I could see, right, as soon as they have that Urgold, they're going to smash that Bloodletter's skull, right? Because again, they need to get that Urgold. And for good or bad, they're gonna get that. But they're doing bad for a good reason. So
Right.
All right. Then you've got the KO, which is Caradhran Overlords, right? And during the Age of Chaos, right? Many people fled. Many people stayed and fight. Right. In this case, the KO, who were sort of the sons of Grungni, he kind of influenced them in their creativity, and they have the sky vessels. They took to the skies. Just sort of got out of Dodge.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. And in the meantime, Grungni hasn't been a very good father to them, to be honest with you. So they feel like he's sort of left them hanging, like he's abandoned them, because he didn't help them in their time of need when they really needed it. So they really, I think the KO feel like they don't need their god to be successful. And occasionally, Grungni will try to include himself, right? Kind of like the father who wasn't there, but he still wants to come around every now and then, and be counted as part of the group, right? He kind of every now and then he'll pop his head in to make sure that his kids are doing okay, whether they want him to be there or not. But
the absentee father.
Right, yeah, right. So he's abandoned them. I think that he's a better father than Teclis. But I wouldn't say not a whole lot better.
Yeah.
Right. But having said that, right, I'm not a huge fan of the KO either. So I think Grungni and I get along great. So I think that generally there's better things to do than to mess with the KO. The
KO dwarves, man, those guys are definitely all about that Urgold and the profit, right? Like. They're like to the letter contracts. Like they'll go make contracts with anyone that will give them that sweet Urgold. So, but they're like you said, like they're up in the sky. They're flying around in flying ships and stuff like that. So they're kind of like sky dwarves.
Dwarves. They go after what's called ether gold.
Yeah,
which is the gold that lets their vessels actually float. Like that's what they use to take flight in. Is they use that aether gold as a resource that gives them the ability to move above the clouds. Right.
Yep.
And so, like you said, they will do anything to get that. And that that is just what gives them flight, which is pretty cool. Right. Again, I have a lot of respect for them in terms of lore because they went and did things on their own, right? They literally did a neglected child that figured it out for themselves, right? And said, hey, I don't need you, Dad. We got this figured out. But they're not in a mine. Right. They're not hitting stuff with hammers, right? They're not in my opinion, they are less honorable than like the Fire Slayers are because Fire Slayers are doing this for a reason, not their own reason. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Where KO, it's all about their merit, the amount of gold that they have, the deeds that they've done. It's a very self-indulged lore. Where the Fire Slayers, they still give obeisance to a god, right? That
Right.
that they're just doing what they need to do to keep their god in their life happy and whatever. And for me, that brings them closer to traditional dwarves than these guys in the skies with guns, right?
Yeah.
Which is very anti-dwarf to me, but they're dwarf cousins. How's that?
Well, I think what's interesting, so like you look at, the Lord of the Rings, and it obviously had a very heavy, Tolkien had a very, very heavy influence on, Warhammer, like
Everything
the old
dwarf.
world. Yeah, I mean, everything dwarf. Like, they became the archetype. I would say, like, Bilbo and the 12 dwarves that he was like heading out with, and then you've got Gimli, right? Like, they became the archetype of like what dwarves should and are. And I mean, Tolkien based his stuff heavily off of, like we said, the Norse and Germanic mythology, especially uh, the Anglo-Saxon mythology, because a lot of Tolkien's writings was written from like that British perspective, so like the men of Rohan were like the Anglo-Saxons, the men of Gondor were like the Britons that were there, and then you've got stuff like the dwarves and the elves and things like that were part of that lore that was out there, that mythology that existed on the British Isles, that were brought there from the Celtic tribes, from the Anglo-Saxon tribes, from the French, like the Gallic French tribes, like all that kind of stuff. So the Romans as well. So he kind of had a wealth of knowledge to derive this kind of dwarvish archetype from. But boy, like you look at Dragon Age video games, it's a Tolkien-esque dwarf. You look at The Witcher, they're not as Tolkien-esque, like they're not digging in the mines and stuff like that, but they're still very oriented against like commerce and trade and industrialness and things like that, right? Even though they may live on the surface. And like you said, Age of Sigmar, like very, and even Warhammer Fantasy, like very Tolkien-esque dwarves. Like it's hard to break that stereotype, I think, because once you start messing with the dwarf stereotype, you're in another race. You're in a different group, right?
Which I think the KO are trying to do, or a little bit, right? Because again, right, one of the things that I wrote down for a dwarf, right, is a warrior, right?
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but there's not a single model in the KO army that I think is described as a warrior.
Nope. I mean, you've got the Arcanaut Company.
I mean,
maybe.
Like, to me, so it's easily seen in the other dwarven races in Warhammer. And KO, I've maybe got to squint my eyes a lot.
Yeah.
Guys a warrior.
I agree.
So, anywho, and then you got Dispossessed, right? And I talked about them a little bit, right? They're the ones who, during the Age of Chaos, right? Sigmar said, everybody go to Azir, right? And so they went with all the other human species and elven species to the cities of Sigmar, where they lived for a long time, right? And they worked together, and they crafted, and they helped with the cannons, even though they're not in Warhammer right now, and everything else that the dwarf ingenuity they kept for humanity's sake, right? For order's sake. So, like I said, they're like the Gimlis, right? They're willing to work with everybody else for the sake of good, and which is what I think a dwarf would definitely be willing to do. And they are just driven to be good, and they are obviously the sons of Grungni and Grimnir, but they are more of a well-rounded dwarf. How's that? In my opinion, that they kind of are both warriors, but they also have the artisanship, right? From Grungni, where they are just helping to fight and helping to build in the cities of Sigmar. So, for me, right, Dispossessed are still the real dwarves.
right?
In Warhammer. But like I said, I do really, really like Fire Slayers. Now, when they first came out, I was not a fan. I used to have an all Slayer army in Warhammer 8.0, right? All Slayers.
Yeah.
And Fire Slayers was just very different. It was like, what's wrong with my Slayers? Why they got to be Fire Slayers, right? But the way the lore works out, I'm actually a fan. I think they're a good army. definitely number 2 on my list for Dwarven armies for
Yeah.
Warhammer.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk RPGs. So you played a few RPGs. Like, what kind of RPG do you think you like the dwarves in the best?
Like what character role?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can talk about character
like
role.
Dwarf is usually what Dwarf is a paladin, a cleric.
Yeah, or
right?
like what are
or a fighter, right?
yeah. So you could talk about character, or you could talk about system. Like, what system do you like the interpretation of the dwarf in the best? And if you haven't played a lot, then talk about like what character you like using dwarves as.
Yeah. So I think that man, I don't know. Like I just have like dwarf in my brain, right? Like kind of the words I gave you right before describing what I think a dwarf is, right? So like if you're gonna play an RPG, and you ask me to play a dwarf, or I decide to play a dwarf, right?
Yeah.
My dwarf is gonna be an ale drinking, beard wearing, if he's able to gunpowder shooting engineer guy who hits things with hammers when he's too far when he has to get close, right? That's what a dwarf to me is going to be. So that could lend its way to being, a lot of things. But to me, like cleric is the first thing that comes up, right? Some kind of a healer that can hit things with a hammer, right? And maybe a berserker if he takes off his shirt, right? Runs around. One of his 3 armors, right? Heavily armored, light armored, and then no armor.
Right, exactly.
So
I think I think that like World of Warcraft has really kind of helped solidify the stereotypes of dwarf stuff, right? You talked about running around in that and like mining all the time and feeling very thematic while you did it, right? Yeah, absolutely.
The whole time I was like, I am a dwarf living online.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember that dwarf, the Diggy Diggy Hole song. Do you remember that?
Yes. That's so
I would
funny.
literally play that while I mined with my dwarf at the same time.
So funny.
It was pretty funny.
Well, I did want to give a shout out to the Shadow of the Demon Lord, because Robert Schwab there wrote a supplement called For Golden Glory, and it was just all about like creating awesome dwarves in the Shadow of the Demon Lord. And his supplements, if you haven't ever seen them before, his supplements are like $2 each, and they're about it's about 17 pages, and like I don't know, 8 pages of it is like background and lore, and then like the other 9 pages of it is going to be like how to build a character with extra tables and options and things like that. It's a great value for $2 because like his lore stuff is fantastic. And I just want to kind of like hit some high points from his PDF that he has. So their dwarves are pretty, I mean, again, they follow the stereotypical model. They're short, they're stout. Everybody's got facial hair, including the women. They've got more hair in the armpits and groin, though, interestingly. And they got involved in the troll wars at one point, where the trolls were coming out of the mountains and into kind of their strongholds, and so their population was reduced for a little bit because they were just like busy fighting trolls all the time. But they've got like the long lives, they've got the typical like dwarven strongholds that are under the mountains and all of that stuff. They see ghosts, like their dwarven ghosts, like wander the halls, and it's not uncommon for them to interact with their honored dead. And in fact, like that's part of their culture, is like that their honored dead are always with them. So kind of interesting. They still have the industriousness in all things, but getting into this is what I love, the wrinkle that Robert Schwab gives. They have towering pride. There's like a half a page dedicated to how prideful these dwarves are. And like, you better not like make fun of them. You better not try to like, challenge them or whatever, because it's just like their racial trait that they have, that they don't back down. You know what I mean? Right. And so don't do it. The other aspect of it is they have overpowering greed. So they've got this like trait inside of them that they can't help it. And here's I want to kind of read one of the rules here. It says, dwarves in madness' grip find find the lust for gold grows unbearable and find it harder and harder to resist the impulses to take whatever valuables they find. Gold lust is a common dwarven affliction that arises in those who have suffered great strain and stress. Dwarves pity those who succumb to this malady and do their best to guide them back to sanity, and if they fail, lock them away before they bring shame on themselves. So, one of the mechanics in Shadow of the Demon Lord is they have a major sanity mechanic, right, that can make you go mad. So when a dwarf would go mad, roll a d6. On an even number, roll a d20 to determine the form of the madness takes as normal. On an odd number, the dwarf becomes afflicted with gold lust. And gold lust is that if you can see an object worth 1 gold coin or more, you become impaired until you take that object. And at the end of each minute, roll a d6. A roll of 5 or higher will end the madness, right? So impaired means that you can only take a slow turn in that game and that you roll with a Bane, which can like lower your score. So basically anything that is worth 1 gold coin. So if you're fighting a dude who's got like a fancy dagger, like all he has eyes for is that dagger, you know, and so he's going to go attack that guy. He's going to try to get that knife or that dagger. And until he does so, he's going to be impaired. So, yeah, what's interesting is if you would gain a long-term madness, which is like pretty much permanent, if you roll an odd number, you get like gold lust long term. And so what this does in long term is you lust for precious metals and stones. Your lust for precious metals and stones overpowers you. Whenever you see an item worth at least 1 gold coin, you must get success on a will challenge roll or become impaired until you take it. So even like social encounters, you could like be freaking out a little bit. So anything worth 1 gold coin, you freak out. So that has come up where like I've had players in my campaigns playing dwarves, and they see something, right? Or they would go mad, and all of a sudden they just started lusting after the gold, and like they're just like, "All right, I'm out," and like they'd like run to the other side of the room to go pick up that like golden thing that they see, and their friends are like, "Dude, what are you doing? Like, we need you in this fight," and they're just like, "Nope, got to go pick up the gold." So,
That's funny.
and in a total Robert Schwab twist, for those who know Robert Schwab, he doesn't just put on his like, oh, these are like happy dwarves living in the mountains. Their background is called Grimnir's Curse, so they also have a god that's called Grimnir, right? And they used to like serve Grimnir, but they weren't like always short, stout, and hairy. Like they were Grimnir and the other dark gods. They formed them as like this striking, regal people who were tall, statuesque, and like perfect in every way. Like they were almost like what the elves were. You know what I mean? And what happened was they started to get a little prideful and envious of the dark gods. So they went up on top of the tallest mountain, and they started building a giant tower to reach the gods. So basically a Tower of Babel, right? And the dark gods saw what was happening, and they basically cursed them. And it made them short and stout and ugly, and they had to kind of live with that for the rest of their days. So, yeah. So that's how the dwarves are made.
I think I've only played a dwarf a few times in any RPG other than D&D.
Okay.
So
yeah.
But
I mean, again, like you start messing around with it, right? If they're not short and they're tall, they're gonna be a human, right? So like you have to have them short. If they're not angry little dwarves or like sweet little dwarves, and okay, that's a little different. Like I guess they're a gnome at that point. You know what I mean?
right,
like
dwarves are kind of aggressive, right? You
yeah.
know? Yeah, right.
So it's almost like you have to play into the stereotype, because if you don't, there's other races that like would fit that description better. You know, like a nice dwarf is a halfling. Like it's a hobbit. You know what I mean? Like that's a nice dwarf. You know, a kind of cowardly dwarf is.
But hobbits don't have beards, so they don't.
Yeah, exactly. Right? That's true. Yeah, take the beard away, and you got a hobbit, right? So, take away their bravery and courage, and you've got a gnome, basically. Right. You know. So, yeah, like once you start adjusting like what the dwarves are, you can't like mess around too much, or else you turn them into something they're not.
We're gonna take away their hammers and their warrior and oh wait, those are KO. Never mind. Just kidding.
Gotcha.
Just
Yeah.
kidding.
All right, so we obviously know dwarves and they're portrayed well in the movies. Like, what's your favorite dwarf movie?
My favorite dwarf movie?
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. Like The Hobbit got such a bad reception initially, and people I think are growing on it later. I just watched it a few weeks
And?
ago, and I really just enjoy watching them.
I gotta watch it. I guess I gotta watch it again. I just wish it.
Right.
It should have been 2 movies though. That was my issue with it. It's like it didn't need to be 3. But maybe I'm wrong.
There was another dwarf movie that I saw. Let me see if I can remember what it was called. That I really liked, actually. I think it is called Blood on the Mountain.
Okay.
No, that's not it. That's something else. That's some weird West Virginia thing. There's sorry guys, that's funny. No, there's a dwarf movie on Netflix, and it's these 3 dwarves, and they're mining in a cave,
Okay.
effectively. And while they're down there, they encounter some monsters and some other things, and it's pretty cool movie. I'll see if I can find it. What's your favorite dwarf movie?
So, I'm gonna go kind of non-canon on this one, and you're gonna roast me for it. I know you are, but that's okay. I was gonna say Willow.
Well,
But here's a problem, and I realize
yeah.
Willow's really like they're not dwarves, they're hobbits, right? They're halflings more than they're dwarves. If you think about it.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
I think I would say that's probably right. Yeah.
But I love the fact that they just call Willow Peck in the throughout the movie, right? Peck, come here, Peck. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I guess there's just not a lot of dwarf movies out there that you're just like, wow, that was a really good dwarf movie.
So there's a dwarf movie, and like it does. If you guys have watched, we're all nerds here. So like the Mythica series, right, on like Amazon Prime. So I found the name of the movie. It's called Dwarves of Dragon Mountain.
Okay.
And it's on Amazon Prime. So if you have, it's definitely worth watching. And so it says, in a fantasy world, 4 dwarves are mining in the dangerous Dragon Mountain when a sudden explosion causes a cave-in, trapping the dwarves inside. Dun dun dun.
Dang.
Epic and truly suspenseful. I thought it was cool, man. Like I watched that movie and I was like, wow, this is a movie about dwarves.
Yeah.
Like just dwarves. Like it's not about a bunch of elves and humans. This is a movie about 4 dwarves stuck in a mountain, and it wasn't terrible. So I would recommend watching it if you like dwarves.
I think. What about Time Bandits?
That's actually pretty good. That's
right.
Funny. Yep.
I mean, they're kind of
definitely.
like not your classic like dwarves, but still though they're dwarves, right? They're dwarves.
Definitely qualifies for
And
sure. Definitely
and
qualifies.
in the description, it definitely they call them dwarfs. So, Time Bandits is a great movie.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah. So that's
Like I said, Gimli's probably one of my favorite dwarves, and he's Lord of the Rings, so
yeah.
we'll put him in there. And
So
he was great.
it's interesting you say that because I actually preferred not Gimli. I preferred what's his name from
Thorin or something else. Hobbit or
from The Hobbit. What was his name? I'm blinking on it right now. It is
what are all the Hobbit dwarf names?
Thranduil. No, Thranduil was the dang it, I'm looking it up right now. It's Dwalin.
Right,
It's Dwalin. Right?
Dwalin. Yeah. The
Yep.
bigger, taller, bald one with the hammer,
Yep.
right? Yep. Totally.
Yep. Like
Yep,
he's
yep.
great.
He
was good.
He's totally great. That is a dwarf, my friend.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And
100%.
and a lot of the great A lot of the great dwarves like are there in like even in the book The Hobbit, like they all have such great personalities there, and
Right.
I thought that Tolkien did a good job of like giving them their unique identities, even though you've got like a bunch of these guys. So yeah, Dwalin was great. Balin was good too. So and who didn't like the Dori Nori Ori guy? Like the
Right.
like the brothers, right, kind of thing. So yeah.
So I also was last week. I was listening to the Hobbit on the audiobook.
Okay.
So Andy, is it Serkis, the guy who played Gollum?
Oh yeah, Andy Serkis. Yeah.
Serkis, right? He actually does the entire audiobook
No
of
way.
the Hobbit
Whoa.
on Audible. So definitely, I recommend you pick it up. I was listening to it last week, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was so great, and he's got such a great voice, and he doesn't always sound like Gollum, right? So like when he does Gandalf, he does a really good job with the voice for Gandalf. So highly recommend it.
Nice. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, let's see. If we're talking dwarves, you alluded that you're going to be taking a dwarven list up to the boys. Why don't you?
I am. I'm taking all dwarves,
which is rare.
But dwarves.
So I don't think if our listeners don't play Age of Sigmar, which some of them don't, I don't think that you appreciate how rare this is. Because in the cities of Sigmar, you can kind of mix and match some of your units a little bit.
Yeah, like over 100, maybe 100 units.
Yeah,
close
and
to that,
so
probably.
like if they do bring them, they're just bringing the shooting dwarves, or they might just bring like the shield dwarves, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody really runs a all dwarf army, and part of it is they're a little slow, and
slow.
movement is
Very slow.
movement is king in Age of Sigmar. Right.
In pretty much all tabletop games.
Yeah, movement is king. Because if you can't get to where you
even Warcry.
Yep. Oh, totally.
Warcry, it's huge.
Totally
huge.
Yeah.
Right. Huge.
Yeah.
So so dwarves used to be their own faction, right?
Yep.
In Warhammer.
Yep.
And the world of Warhammer Fantasy, dwarves were their own faction. So this army was my attempt at bringing an all dwarf army that I would say this is the old dwarf faction.
Nice.
I'm playing it like a dwarf army. There is no human ally in here. There's no elves. There's no nothing. It's just dwarves. Because of the limited abilities for the dwarves in the book, I gave my dwarf rune lord. I don't want to call them spells, right? Because dwarves don't generally have spells.
Yeah.
So I tried to give him abilities that would be more like abilities and less like spells.
Okay.
So I'll start the list with my general. So he's a rune lord, right? He's 95 points. He has a command trait that gives all friendly units. So the city I'm playing is called Tempest Eye, and the army itself has its own bonuses that I'll review in just a minute. But I'll start with just the leader, my general first. So he has a command trait called Hawkeye, which gives +1 to wound for all shooting dispossessed, which is what they call dwarves, right, in Cities of Sigmar, units wholly within 12 inches. So any of my units shoot something, they get +1 to wound automatically just for being wholly within 12 inches of him, which is pretty cool. I give him Arcane Tome so that he can take a spell. But the spells I take one called Strike of Eagles, which I'm imagining, right, this dwarf calling eagles, right, maybe some hand gestures, doing the caca, right?
Yep.
Some kind of he's calling a strike of eagles on the enemy. So the eagles come down, and for that it goes off on a 7. So again, it's not super easy to get off, right? It goes off on a 7, 30-inch range. I roll 6 dice for every 4+. You take a mortal wound. So again, it's not like a game-breaking spell. I'm not doing it to try to meta this guy. I wanted to give him some abilities, and spells were the best way for me to be able for him to have an impact on the battlefield. And because I'm running a warlord battalion, I'm getting a second spell with him, and that is called Aura of Glory. And so this, I could imagine a rune lord like yelling at his dwarven warriors around him and encouraging them. And so what this does, it gives Cities of Sigmar units, which in this case is all dwarves, +1 attack if they are wholly within 12 inches of him. So he's like, encouraging them to fight harder, fight stronger,
Yeah.
And so these are his 2 spells that I gave him, trying to keep with what I think is a dwarven theme. And then he's got 2 prayers. He has Curse, which is you roll a 4+, and you pick an enemy within 9 inches, and 6 is to hit, do mortal wounds. He also has the choice of 2 other prayers on his War Scroll, Ancestral Shield, which goes off on a 2+, and you get a 6-up ward save for a friendly unit. And Forge Fire, which is on a 2+, you give a friendly unit +1 to their rend, which can be huge. That can be +1 rend for melee or +1 rend for shooting. It's +1 rend to the attacks of the unit, so it counts for both. Then I have a second Rune Lord. He has the Healing Prayer, which allows him to heal a friendly unit within 12 inches, D3 wounds. So I've got that. And then I have a Warden King, who a lot of people don't take. He is a dwarf guy who stands on an oath. He has an Oath Stone ability, which I find to be really, really useful in the current meta of of Warhammer, Age of Sigmar. What it is in your hero phase, you declare that he's not going to move, and he's going to stand atop his Oath Stone, and so that means he can't move for the rest of your turn.
Yeah.
And as long as he stays on that Oath Stone until your next hero phase, there are no battle shock tests for Cities of Sigmar units, for dispossessed units, wholly within 18 inches of him. So what you do is you draw a 36-inch bubble, right? You draw this great big circle around him, try to keep your units in that 18-inch bubble if you can, at least for the first couple of turns, and you ignore all battle shock tests, which is great. And then he also has an ability that you can use in the combat phase called Ancestral Grudge, right? Which the dwarves of old, right, kept a book of grudges, right? So if you wronged the dwarfs, they would write your name in the book of grudges, and then they would eventually get their revenge on you, right? So it's called Ancestral Grudge, and he chooses for a command point, you choose an enemy unit within 18 inches. Your whole army has +1 attack against that unit in combat for that turn. So you have to be close to it, right? You have to be fighting it, right? But so that means, so I use this because I can double this with the ability of my Rune Lord, right? Remember, the Rune Lord has the Aura of Glory, which gives +1 attack to everything within 12 inches.
I remember.
And then I can use his ability, Ancestral Grudge, to give another +1 attack. So it only works for Dispossessed for his ability, but that gives me +2 attacks for some of my units in combat. So it makes dwarves very fighty, which is what dwarves should be. For my battle line, I have almost everything in my list is battle line, which is kind of funny, but it's just the way that it works out. So I've got 20 Iron Drakes, which are great for shooting. I have 10 Iron Drakes. The Iron Drakes have a 16-inch gun. There's 3s and 3s -1 damage, and then they also have a torpedo, which is 3s and 3s -2 damage, -2 rend, sorry, and D3 damage if it's a regular unit, or D6 damage if it is a monster. And Iron Drakes have a special ability that if there's no enemy units within 3 inches of them, they get an extra shot. So they get 2 shots with their Drake gun, and they also get 2 shots with their torpedo, but they can't move that turn. Right, so they have to stay stationary, right, and then shoot. If they want the extra shot. They also get +1 save against all enemy shooting units, which is pretty awesome, because when you have a unit that shoots and you get bonuses against other shooting units, that's almost always a great thing. So I have a unit of 20, and I have a unit of 10. Then I have 20 hammerers, and hammers. So I have 2 units of 20 hammers, and they have an ability called King's Guard. If they find themselves outside that 18-inch bubble of my warden, as long as they are wholly within 12 inches of any dwarf hero, they don't have to take battle shock. So they can be sort of stoic on their own and not have to worry about battle shock. And for them, they have 2 attacks each, 3s and 3s -1 damage, and any 6s to wound cause mortal wounds in addition to regular damage. So I really like to take these guys and either give them the extra rend, or give them the extra 2 attacks, or give them all of the above, and they really become crazy. Right? And they have a 4-up armor save base. I got 2 units of those guys. Then I have a unit of 10 Iron Breakers, a unit of 20 Iron Breakers, and another unit of 10 Iron Breakers. And Iron Breakers have a 3-up armor save base, which is the best thing they have going for They have a 3-up armor save base. They have 2 attacks each. Their attack profile is not great. And they don't have any rend, but they are the anvil that they can hold you up while I shoot you with my iron drakes or countercharge you with my hammers. And it's hard to chew through 20 iron breakers that come with a 3-up armor save base. And then I have my champion in those units has a Cinder Blast Bomb, which means once per game. On a 2+, I get to do D3 mortal wounds to an enemy unit within 8 inches, which is pretty great. I'm trying to remember. It might be 6 inches. Trying to recall that right now. I should have that memorized, and for some reason, slipping my brain.
But I mean, it's a good list. It's very resilient. You've got some tricks up your sleeve in terms of movement, which benefit you greatly.
And then I also have 2 gyrocopters, right, which have 16-inch move and a steam gun. So I've got 2 gyrocopters. Kind of just a real quick one more time through the list. 2 gyrocopters, 10 iron breakers, 10 iron breakers, 20 iron breakers, 2 units of 20 hammers, 10 iron drakes, 20 iron drakes, a Warden King, a Rune Lord, and a Rune Lord. And then my army, because I'm playing Tempest Eye, they get +3 movement for first round. So that means that my 4-inch movement dwarves become 7-inch movement dwarves for round 1. They always get +1 to their run, no matter for the entire game. And then all of my units also have musicians, which give them inherently a +1 to their run, which means on turn 1, if I roll a 6, my dwarf units can move 15 inches.
Wow.
With their run. So now I've got very fast moving dwarves on turn 1, and I have +1 to my armor save for all of round 1. So my iron breakers go to 2-ups. My warriors go to 4-ups. My hammers go to 4-ups, right? I go to 2-ups before modifiers against shooting on my iron drakes. So there's just lots of really great things about it. I also have the ability to run and shoot with a unit called Rapid Redeploy. As long as my shooting unit is wholly within 12 inches of a dwarf hero, I can run and shoot with them, which can also be really great. So that means on turn 1, I can take my shooting unit if I wanted to, and I could literally run them 15 inches and then shoot. Yeah. So I've done a 15-inch move and then shot 16 inches. So that's a 31-inch threat range with shooting, and I deploy it 11 or 12 inches. That's the table, right? So that's pretty great.
Yeah, when we played the other day, they got right up in my face right away, which kind of made some strategic choices a little tough. So I wish you the best up at Du Bois with this list. I think it's going to catch quite a few people by surprise. You know, because I just don't think that a lot of people, one, are playing against Cities of Sigmar. And if they are, it's not this list.
It's not all dwarves, right?
Yeah.
So I have 12 drops, which is good or bad.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. And I'm 1975, so I'm down 25 points. So, but I don't have any long beards in my list. That's really the only dwarf unit that I'm not using. They are 5 points cheaper than the iron breakers, and they have half as many attacks. They do have some special abilities that I think aren't that great. I'll take the 2-up for the mortal wounds, for the Cinder Blast Bomb, and the extra armor save over the Longbeard. So that's only 5 points more for the iron breakers. And even if I'm down 25 points. So I were to go to Longbeard, it's not going to give me enough points to give me anything meaningful in my list that I don't already have. So no Longbeards for me today, but they're okay.
So when I look at Warcry, they suffer from a little bit of the same issue that you have in Age of Sigmar. The dwarves only have 3 movement, which they're stunty legs, right? Like they're not covering a lot of ground. So usually if that's the case, you want to look to the abilities to help make up that gap. If you recall, the list you played at our tournament had the Protectors. They only had a 3-inch move. Now, they had the advantage of having a 3-inch reach on their weapon. So that kind of helped it. Yep. But still, though, if they moved, they only were going 3 inches. So you kind of had to make it up with the ability, which you had that ability on a double dice that you could make a bonus move if somebody was injured within 6 inches of you. And you generally played those two models pretty closely together, so there was almost always someone who at least had 1 wound on them. And so it's the same thing with the dwarves here, though, but they're on much smaller bases. So what do you do to do that? And I was just looking at them. if I were to make up a warband of some of the dwarves here.
Can you take a gyrocopter?
Yes, you can.
No?
I would take one. I would
definitely put
Yeah,
one
so they
in.
have a gyrocopter, gyro bomber, and their stats are almost identical.
Yeah, the gyro bomber usually is slower. So in Age of Sigmar, the gyro bomber only has 12-inch movement, and the gyrocopter has 16. And so I choose the gyrocopter because of the extra movement, and with turn 1 I have +3. So my gyrocopter is 19 inches instead of 12.
Yeah, in this book, the gyro bomber has 2 inches less of movement, but he's still a very respectable 10 inches, which is like half the board,
Right.
So
Right, and you're playing on a smaller board too, right?
yeah. He does have a lot more attacks, which kind of helps with the whiffiness. The problem is both of them they don't have great damage output. Their damage output's kind of weak, and so what that means though is that I would use them.
How many points is the gyrocopter?
Hold on. Excuse me. Gyrocopter is 195, so he'd be like a fifth of your list.
I don't know. It might be just worth having him just to have something that you can run off the table in some of the scenarios, and your enemy has to worry about it, right?
Yeah.
So the movement of the gyrocopter is 12?
Yeah, look, the gyrocopter goes 12 inches. He's 195 points. The gyro bomber's 220 points. Goes 10 inches. I do like... the thing is you're not taking him for their damage, right? So I would rather save 30 points or 25 points and get the extra movement, because what you're doing with them is just trying to get them on the board. Either they're kind of a threat because they can move so far. They don't have the mount trait that other mounted units do, which means that they can grab objectives and fly away, which is huge.
Right. So I think, I would definitely go for the copter just for the extra movement. And sometimes having something that's really fast, even if the unit that you're threatening can kill you, now that unit has to spend his turn killing you instead of a threat.
Catching up. Right? And catching up to him sometimes, right?
Right. So I think that if you're not playing him for the combat, then stay with that plan and play for the movement.
Now, there's other units in here, and the nice thing about the dwarves is that they are high on the damage output. Generally, the base of the dwarves are like damage 2 with a crit of damage 4 or 5, which is, decent for... A lot of them are around 130 or 120 to 100 point models. Your little things like your normal hammer or iron breaker, they're like 60 to 75 to 80 points. But they still have pretty good damage output. Like your hammer is 80 points, 3 attack, strength 4, 2s and 5 damage, which is actually pretty good. So I'd be taking a couple of those guys. You almost want to try to play a numbers game when you've got slow guys, because once they get to an objective, then they're going to overwhelm.
Right, and you can run and work.
Yeah, it's just a double movement. Now, I will say this: what I would do is there's different cities that they can be from. Right, there's the Tempest Eye, there's Hollow Heart, there's the Living City, there's the Phoenicium. There's Greywater Fastness, Living City, and Hammerhall. So what I would actually want to do is not have them come from Hammerhall. That kind of plays into their... So the abilities in Hammerhall plays into their strengths. Like, it's like all about like adding strength and adding, adding attacks and stuff like that, which is great, but you need them to move. So...
Right. Well, I think there is, again, if you're wanting to go we're talking all dwarves, right? Yep. So I think that does Tempest Eye and Warcry give them extra movement?
So Tempest Eye is a good one. I was going to say that the Living Cities, there's a double that gives them 3 to their next move action. So essentially, they could have basically a bonus move, right? As part of their one action for a double.
Does that mean they could go? That means they could go 12 inches if they bonus.
No, because it only says that it affects their next move action. So they could go 6, and then they could go 3. So they could still go 9 inches.
So they could go 9,
which is good, right? Which is good. There is one I do like, Anvil Guard. What this is on a double, a fighter can only use this ability if it's the first battle round, which is fine because you want them to get into position, right? Until the fighter's next activation, add 2 to the move characteristic of this fighter, and add 1 to the attacks characteristics of melee attacks made by this fighter. So that's a really, really good ability. Now, you can only use it in the first battle round, but you're essentially you're turning their move 3 into a move 5.
I wonder if you define yourself in combat, though, with a move 5.
So you might. The problem is that, like, yeah, I mean, like, if you get there and you double move, then you got nothing left, right?
So is it a 5 and a 5?
Yes.
They double move?
So it'd be like 10 inches.
Okay. So you could, yeah. So it's 1 inch more than the Tempest Eye.
Yeah.
But what's the bonus? What's the other bonus? It's the attack that you wouldn't be able to use. And then the Tempest. Is there another bonus?
That's
is that it? What's the other bonus for Tempest Eye?
It's just add 3 to that 1 move action.
But that could be every turn.
That's
not just
exactly.
the first.
Exactly.
Yep. So I think that's the winner between those two.
So, and they have a lot of overlapping abilities. It's not like one is like heavily favors the other. You know what I mean? So, have them come from the living cities, and I think that kind of, it's not as thematic, right? Because like you don't really associate dwarves with living cities, but generally that's like your Gyran sort of area. You know what I mean? But still, though.
Yep.
There's dwarves in all of these cities, so let them come from the living cities and let them move like crazy, and you're kind of making up for their slow pace. And the nice thing about a double is it's easy to make, right?
Yep.
So
very easy. You should be able to. You should have that almost.
You
every
should
turn.
have like a couple if you really needed it every turn. So. Yeah, so very good. But that's where I would go. With the things, I'd get a gyrocopter. I'd probably bring in the, let's see, what's his name here? The Warden King. He's got some good damage on him, and as a leader, like you want him there. And then
Does he have abilities that buff up the guys around him?
Yeah, he does. He's got a bulwark, so he can do like a shield. Let's see. If I'm in living cities, what does he have? Oh, there it is. Okay. So he can add 1 to the toughness characteristics of friendly fighters within 3 inches of him. So that makes them harder to hit, He can add 1 to their attacks characteristics while they're within 6 inches of him. And yeah, I mean, like he's got some good stuff that he can do. So so he's pretty good. And then, like I said before, I would kind of round them out with. So I got the Warden King, the Gyro Bomber. That's like 350 points. So then I'd get a couple of Hammerers, maybe Longbeards.
You can take an Iron Drake for range.
Yeah, an Iron Drake would be pretty good. I'd probably upgrade him though and take the what is it? The Iron Beard with Drake Fire Pistol and Cinderblast Bomb, maybe? Like, he's kind of like the leader version.
Yeah, that's the champion of... Yeah,
so he's got a little bit better damage output and a little bit more, so probably... Or the Iron Warden's actually better. The Iron Warden's where it's at. So, because he's got a range of 3 to 15. So he can shoot 15 inches.
Guess what? We should play Let's play some Warcry, and I'll play some
buddy.
Dwarves. Let's go.
Yeah. So I think it'd be a lot of fun, a ton of fun with these guys. You just gotta match them up with the right ability to to compensate for their slow movement. So.
Yep.
But yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Exactly. So, well, do you have any parting thoughts about dwarves and gaming?
I do, and so I think that generally speaking, if you play a game with your dwarves, you're going to have a great time. And if you play a game with your dwarves a lot, you're going to win a lot. So you're going to be a better general for it. I really feel that way, that you can take an army that maybe to most people isn't that strong. You play it, you get good with it, your generalship is going to improve, and you're going to win most of your games with your dwarf army. And that's going to surprise all your enemies. They're all going to be on their back foot when they see you put those Iron Warriors on the table.
That's right.
That are honorable. They've got beards. They're drinking ale. They're wearing armor. They're engineers. They use gunpowder, and they have hammers. Right? Like that is a win that is a win. I don't care what tabletop game you're playing.
Very good thoughts. I have one last honorable mention that I want to kind of give a shout out to, and this is a great Dwarven board game, and I played it at your house, Lincoln, which is the Dwarven Dwarven Smithy. That's a lot of fun. That's a really fun game, and it's very thematic too. So,
yep. Dwarven Smithy is sort of like your Dwarven Smiths, and you're crafting armor and items and weapons for the king, and so it's a competitive game. It's sort of like your crafting in World of Warcraft. It's very similar to that, I would say. It's a ton of fun, and you can find the game on eBay. That's the best place to look for it, and I would get the deluxe edition so you can get the metal coins.
Oh, the metal coins make
awesome.
it.
It's an excellent game. Highly
recommend.
So
10
out of 10.
Hopefully we gave everybody something. If you're into Age of Sigmar, Lincoln went through some Cities of Sigmar for you. I went through some Warcry. We talked RPGs. Here's a great board game for you. Look, dwarves are super iconic, and just lean into them, or I guess on them if you need to. Right?
Lean on them. That's right. They'll hold you up.
That's right. They're very stout.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And I've got some great Fire Slayers armies list for another time. But keep it dwarven, folks.
Keep on digging.
Keep on diggy hole.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. If you like the show, share it with your friends and give us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. That definitely helps the algorithms and helping people find the show. We love when folks find us and listen to us. It's always a pleasure to see people kind of enjoying the show a bit. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Lincoln, for being on the show, by the way.
All right, you bet.
Yep, everybody have a great night.